Well, it's been just over a week since the CBC announced that Canada would be competing at Eurovision, and I have been a busy beaver, laying the groundwork for what I hope becomes Canada's first national Eurovision fan club. Hello and welcome to ESC Canuck, a Eurovision Canadian fan channel operated by me, Scott, a Toronto-based comedian and television professional. First things first, I think Canada already has a Eurovision fan base. I think that fan base comes in a couple of different flavors. First of all, there's a culture of Eurovision parties, and I know that because I've been going to them for the past 12 years. And some of them are incredibly well attended. I'm talking like upwards of 70 people at a party. Maybe only half of those are actually paying attention to the contest, but still, there are Canadians that know what Eurovision is. The second type of Eurovision fans in Canada are those who discovered it independently online, maybe through a content creator or just hearing about it on news sites or Reddit. And the third major source of fans that pre-exist in Canada is, I believe, immigrants. I'm one of them. I come from Australia, a country that does have a sizable Eurovision fan base and a culture about this crazy, wonderful contest. And there's also a lot of European migration into Canada from people who have seen the contest before and start spreading the word when they make new friends over here. So when Canada announced it was participating in Eurovision, I think a lot of people got really excited, but looking around, especially on the internet, you may not know it. That's because before competing, Canadian Eurovision fans were at most only ever organized on the local level. All you really need to know is once a year who's throwing the party and what do you need to bring. Honestly, deviled eggs. Or in my case, Portuguese custard tarts. However, now that we've announced, I think there's going to be a whole lot of Canadian Eurovision fans who are looking for community and looking for a way to connect with other people all across the country. In the lead up to the contest in 2027, especially as our artist gets announced and Eurovision begins to percolate more through the mainstream, there's going to be a lot of Canadians who become aware of Eurovision for the very first time. And while they'll have official channels to lean on, like the CBC and Eurovision itself, I'm interested in creating a space for Canadian fans to start to talk to one another, meet one another, and sharing the love and the joy of this contest that we all enjoy, despite its politics sometimes. That's why I'm introducing the Canadian Fans of Eurovision. This is a project I have just launched. The concept behind Canadian Fans of Eurovision is that it's laying the groundwork for a national Canadian fan club. That said, we're starting small. So far, the Canadian Fans of Eurovision has a Facebook page, it has an Instagram account, and most importantly, it has a website and a sign up for an email newsletter. And eventually, the goal is to have this organization, the Canadian Fans of Eurovision, running events related to Eurovision all across the country, but more on that in a moment. I want to talk about what I'm doing with this platform and why I think you should join or get on board, so let's start with the website. As more Canadians discover Eurovision, it's nice to have a tailored place that they can go and get a brief background on the contest, a bit of information about Canada's history, and also some links to some Canadian content creators that are working in the space. Sort of a brief catch-all to introduce people to the culture of Eurovision. The newsletter, however, which you can sign up for on the website, will come out monthly and will feature things like interviews with Eurovision fans, with Canadian content creators, little bits and pieces of trivia, and maybe some highlighted past entries. You know, a place to keep people interested and active throughout the off-season before we really get into the swing of things starting early next year. So here's my favor to ask you. If you are a Canadian fan of Eurovision, or if you know some Canadians that are always excited when the contest comes around every year, would you consider pointing them at this website and the newsletter? Because the problem that we're gonna face building a Canadian fan club around Eurovision is the fact that we know Eurovision fans are out there, but we don't know where. It's a great way to gauge how many Canadians are interested in the contest, as well as to start asking them the sort of things that they would like from a fan club dedicated to Eurovision. The newsletter especially is going to be the launching pad for eventually setting up some in-person Eurovision events. These might start as simple bar socials, a place where we can play some Eurovision music and you can get to meet some other Eurovision fans in your city, but will hopefully also expand to include things that we can only do online altogether. Canada is a massive place, and more than that, there's a language barrier there, with some speaking French, some speaking English, and some lucky people being bilingual for both. Things Things like polls or trivia or online meetups as well will have to support and round out the kind of events that a Eurovision fan club should be doing, at least in my opinion. Ultimately, we'd like to do more stuff. Things like karaoke, trivia, actual watch parties when Eurovision is airing in Canada. That'll be a very exciting time. But I think it starts now with a website and a newsletter, and from people identifying themselves as Canadian fans of Eurovision. In fact, there may already be some irons in the fire for a meetup in Toronto, which is where I personally am located. Canada has Eurovision fans. We just need to find them and start pulling them all together all across the country. And I really hope that you're part of it. That's all for this video. I will say, I think my priority now is going to be setting up this fan club and trying to get it running, and so videos may become a little less frequent on this channel. If you did enjoy this video or any of the other content on this channel, please give me a like and a subscribe. It would be wonderful to have you updated if and when there's more content. Though if you're looking for that Eurovision experience, sign up for that newsletter. I think great things are ahead for Canada at the Eurovision Song Contest. You only get one chance to make a first impression, and I have a feeling that Canada's is going to be particularly memorable.